Something just happened. Something that military analysts are calling unprecedented. 1 minute ago, not hours, not days, 1 minute ago, Iran launched a missile that, according to their own commanders, has never been shown to the public, never tested on camera, never acknowledged in any official briefing. It didn't exist until now. And the target, not a remote military base, not a desert test range, a city, a real city with millions of people inside it. The alarms went off before anyone could explain what was coming. Defense networks lit up. Radar screens began tracking something moving faster than most interceptors are designed to handle. And in that moment, the entire Middle East held its breath. This is not a drill. This is not a warning shot. This is something else entirely. Stay with us, because what happened in the next 90 seconds changed everything. Here's what we know. Iran's military launched what it is now describing as a classified next-generation ballistic missile, a weapon that until today had never been publicly acknowledged by any Iranian official, any defense ministry, any state broadcaster. Not once. The launch came without a formal declaration, without a countdown, without the usual choreography of Iranian military press events, the generals standing at podiums, the flags, the dramatic music playing underneath footage of missiles rolling through underground tunnels. None of that. This was silent, sudden, and deliberate. Iranian state television broke the news within minutes, not with a press conference, but with a single statement from military commanders that sent intelligence agencies scrambling across 3 continents. The statement said, and pay close attention to this, that Iran had successfully deployed what they called a new class of long-range precision missile, one capable of striking targets at distances and speeds that, according to the statement, no existing regional defense system had ever been specifically calibrated to stop. That phrase, never been specifically calibrated to stop. That is not an accident. That is a message, carefully worded, deliberately released. And what happened next shocked analysts monitoring the region, because the missile wasn't just a weapon, it was a signal. Before we go deeper into exactly what Iran is claiming about this weapon, its design, its range, and why it was kept completely hidden until now, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. We're covering this story in real time, and you don't want to miss a single update as it develops. Let's talk about the missile itself, because this is where the story takes turn. According to Iranian military commanders, the weapon used in today's launch is not an upgrade of any previously known Iranian missile system. It is not a modified version of the Shahab, not an improved Sejil, not a variant of any weapon that Western intelligence agencies have spent years tracking and cataloging. It is, according to Iranian officials, something entirely new. They described it as a deep strike precision system engineered from the ground up to penetrate layered air defense networks. Specifically designed, they said, to exploit the gap that exists between different layers of interception, the lower altitude systems, the mid-range systems, the high altitude interceptors. The missile, they claim, was built to fly through those gaps. Think about what that means. Every advanced missile defense system in the world is built around a known threat profile. You train your radar on what you've seen before. You calibrate your interceptors to the speeds, altitudes, and trajectories you've studied. Iran is now claiming their new missile was engineered specifically to be a threat profile that nobody has studied yet, and there's more. Iranian military sources described the weapon as being launched from a fortified underground complex, one of the dozens of hardened subterranean launch sites that Iran has spent the last decade quietly constructing deep beneath its western territory. These facilities are designed to survive direct aerial bombardment. The launch doors open in seconds. The missile is airborne before any incoming strike can neutralize the platform. Iranian state television didn't just report the launch, they celebrated. Commentators described the moment as, and these are their words, a transformation of the regional equation. They said this missile proved Iran no longer needed to rely on proxy forces, drone swarms, or indirect methods to project military power. It could reach any target at any time without warning. One Iranian military commentator actually paused mid-broadcast and said, now they will understand what we have been building. That pause lasted 3 seconds on live television, and the entire region felt it. Now let's talk about where this missile was aimed. Because the target is not random, nothing about this is random. The destination was the greater metropolitan region surrounding one of the most strategically critical locations in the entire Middle East, a zone that sits at the intersection of economic power, military infrastructure, intelligence operations, and symbolic significance. To strike here, or to claim to strike here, is to send the loudest possible message to the widest possible audience. We're talking about a region where millions of civilians go to work every single morning, where the financial architecture of an entire nation is concentrated, where the buildings that house the country's technology sector, its banking network, its communications infrastructure, all of it sits within a relatively compact geographic footprint. It is, in military terms, a target-rich environment. And in human terms, it is a place full of ordinary people who woke up this morning with no reason to believe today would be any different from yesterday. That contrast between the cold language of strategic targeting and the reality of civilian life underneath a missile trajectory is exactly the kind of contrast that makes incidents like this so profoundly destabilizing. Military analysts have long considered this region to be the central pressure point in any direct Iran-Israel confrontation. Strike here, or credibly threaten to strike here, and you are not just conducting a military operation. You are conducting a psychological one. You are telling the enemy, we can reach the heart of what you've built. We can reach the place you thought was safe. Iranian officials understood this. The choice of target was not made by accident, and here's where things take a turn. Because while Iran was broadcasting its version of events, while state television was running analysis segments, and military officials were giving carefully worded statements, something else was happening. Thousands of kilometers away, in a different country, a completely different story was being told. Before we go into what Israel's military is now saying, and why the gap between Iran's claims and Israel's response may be the most important detail in this entire story, make sure you're subscribed. Hit the notification bell so you get the update the moment we post the next development. Israel responded fast. Within minutes of the Iranian announcement, Israel's defense establishment released a statement that was brief, controlled, and carefully structured. Air defense systems had had been activated, radar networks detected incoming projectile, interceptors were launched, and according to Israeli officials, the threat was neutralized. That word, neutralized, not minimized, not partially intercepted, not reduced, neutralized. Neutralized. Israeli military spokesman confirmed that air raid sirens had been triggered across parts of the country. Civilians had moved into shelter. Emergency protocols were activated across the defense network. Interceptor batteries deployed. But when it came to damage, when reporters pressed for details about what actually struck the ground, Israeli officials were precise and deliberate how they framed their answer. There were no reports of catastrophic structural damage, no confirmed casualties in the immediate aftermath. The defense network, they said, had performed exactly as designed. And then they did something interesting. They stopped talking. No dramatic press conference, no footage release, no generals standing in front of shattered buildings pointing at debris, just a short statement and silence. Contrast that with what was happening on Iranian state television. At the exact same moment, the celebration, the commentators, the dramatic music, the framing of this as a historic military achievement. Two completely different stories happening simultaneously about the same event. This is the moment where any analyst worth listening to will tell you, slow down, because in situations like this where two sides are telling completely opposite versions of reality in real time, the truth almost never belongs entirely to either narrative. Pentagon sources, speaking to international media on background, confirmed that missile launch activity had been detected. Early assessments were underway. The situation was being monitored at the highest level. That confirmation alone from American intelligence tells you that whatever happened, it was real. Something was launched, something was tracked, and something happened at the end of that trajectory. What exactly? That remains the critical question. And what happened next shocked analysts following the situation from Washington to Moscow. The call started immediately. Defense analysts, former intelligence officials, regional security experts, all of them suddenly on camera, on the phone, in emergency briefings, all of them trying to answer the same question. What does this actually mean? Here's the answer that kept coming up over and over. It means the threshold has moved. For years, for decades, the confrontation between Iran and Israel operated according to a kind of unspoken set of rules. Proxy forces, covert operations, targeted strikes that both sides could credibly deny or contain. A constant low-level war fought in the shadows, where neither side pushed hard enough to trigger a full-scale direct military exchange. Those rules just got rewritten. If Iran has genuinely developed and deployed a previously unknown missile system, one specifically designed to challenge existing defense architectures, then every strategic calculation in the region needs to be revisited from the ground up. Every war game, every contingency plan, every assumption about deterrence, all of it, because the fundamental logic of deterrence depends on knowing what the other side has. You deter a known threat. You calibrate your defenses against a known threat. You negotiate with a known threat. An unknown threat breaks that logic entirely. And Iranian officials know exactly what they're doing by framing this launch the way they have. Even if the technical details are partly exaggerated, even if the missile's capabilities are not quite as extraordinary as the initial statement suggests, the claim itself does strategic work. It creates uncertainty. And in military confrontations, uncertainty is a weapon. Meanwhile, energy markets reacted almost immediately. Oil prices moved, not catastrophically, not yet. But analysts watching the trading floors noted the kind of nervous upward pressure that appears whenever the Middle East tips toward direct conflict. The Strait of Hormuz carries roughly 20% of the world's daily oil supply. Any serious regional escalation puts that corridor at risk. And markets don't wait for confirmation, they price in the fear of what might happen. That fear moved numbers today. Diplomatic phones were ringing across multiple capitals before the first hour was over. Messages were sent through back channels, the kind of communications that never appear in official statements, but that represent the actual architecture of crisis management in the modern world. European governments issued calls for restraint. Gulf states watching this with extraordinary attention given their own geographic proximity were making their own quiet calculation. And in the background, behind all of it, one question kept surfacing in every briefing room, every intelligence assessment, every conversation between people who understood what was actually at stake. Is this the beginning, or is this the warning before the beginning? Because those are two very different things. A warning can be absorbed, managed, responded to through diplomatic channels. A beginning cannot be undone. Here is where things stand right now. Two narratives, two realities, one event. Iran says it launched the most powerful missile in its arsenal, a weapon that had never been revealed, never been acknowledged, specifically engineered to beat the defenses designed to stop it. Iranian officials are presenting this as a transformation, a demonstration that nothing going forward can be considered safe, that the era of proxy conflict and shadowed warfare is giving way to something more direct, more visible, more dangerous. Israel says its defenses work, that the threat was tracked, intercepted, and neutralized before it could achieve its objective. Israeli officials are framing this as validation proof that years of investment in layered defense architecture and rapid response systems was justified, that the country is protected. Both of those narratives serve a purpose. Both of them are designed to be believed. And somewhere between them, in the space that neither government is fully illuminating, lies the version of events that analysts will spend the next weeks and months trying to reconstruct from satellite imagery, radar data, debris analysis, and the kind of quiet intelligence work that never makes it into a press release. What we know for certain is this: something was launched, something was tracked. The region activated its emergency protocol. Governments around the world responded within minutes, and the world tomorrow looks different from the world yesterday. Not because of what definitely happened, but because of what might have happened. What could happen next? That uncertainty, that gap between claim and confirmation, is precisely the space where the next phase of this confrontation will be decided. If Iran's claims about this missile are fully accurate, the regional security landscape has genuinely shifted. Defense planners will need to update their threat assessment. Intelligence agencies will redouble efforts to understand the full scope of Iran's Iran's hidden arsenal. And every ally, every partner, every adversary in the region will be recalculating their own position. If Israel's account is fully accurate, if the defenses genuinely neutralize this launch, then the question becomes, what happens when Iran launches again? Because analysts across the board agree on one thing. A country that has just made this kind of public global announcement about a secret weapon does not stop at one launch. There is a logic to escalation. There is a pressure behind it. And that pressure does not simply dissipate because one missile was intercepted. The next move belongs to no one and everyone simultaneously. Israel must decide how to respond without triggering a spiral it cannot control. Iran must decide whether its message was received and whether it needs to be sent again, louder. The United States, watching through every surveillance asset it has in the region, must decide when quiet monitoring becomes active involvement. And the millions of civilians in the cities caught in the geography between these decisions, they are simply waiting, watching, hoping that the men making these calculations understand the weight of what they are holding. Because right now, in this moment, the Middle East is balancing on an edge. And nobody, not the analysts, not the generals, not the diplomats, not the intelligence agencies with all their satellites and intercepts and back-channel communications, nobody knows exactly which way it falls. Stay close, because this story is not over. It is only beginning. And the next development, whatever it is, could come at any moment. Stay